Good morning, Acting Mayor, members of council. This meeting is now being live streamed.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Clerk. Welcome, members of the public. Good morning, members of council. I'm going to begin with a statement. I just want to say that this council extends our united grief and solidarity with the Muslim community in London, in York region, and all across Canada for the tragedy that occurred. We should also have a moment of silence in honor of the murdered family and send our deepest communal sympathies to the 9-year-old child Fayez, who has lost his entire family to an unspeakable act of terror. Richmond Hill stands with all Muslims and will not tolerate hate or bigotry anywhere at any time. So members of council, if you could bow your heads, and we'll just take a moment of silence to recognize this tragic loss. Okay, thank you, members of council. I did notice before we have the anthem, Deputy Mayor Pirelli, you had your request to speak sign up.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. When you said good morning, I wanted to say good morning, but my microphone was muted. So good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Okay, members of council, can you all rise while we have the playing of our country's national anthem? Okay, thank you. We do not have anyone indicating a desire to speak in our public forum, which normally precedes council. So we'll go right into council announcements. Anyone have an announcement to make? Deputy Mayor Pirelli, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and excellent announcement that you made regarding the Muslim tragedy that took place. Thank you for that. I'd like to let everybody know that my Enviro Day event, which has been postponed several times now, because of the recent provincial announcement, will be going ahead on Saturday and Sunday from 10 till 8, and of course the following weekend as well, Saturday and Sunday. All the residents who registered, we have over 7,000 residents registered, will all get a time slot that they can appear. It's a 1-hour window. We're trying to be as efficient as possible with about 150 per hour, with 3 lanes of traffic at the Elgin Barrow Arena. So it's going to be an exciting time. If you're watching at home, you will get an email telling you when your allotted slot is. I want to thank all the members of council who will be joining me during the event to help out as well. And I look forward to seeing everybody out there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Munch.
Good day. I'd just like to recognize and thank the acting mayor for the announcement, bringing it forward today on behalf of myself and the residents of Ward 2. And I thought the statement was well done. I hope we all recognize what a tragedy that was. And I want to thank you for doing that, sir.
Oh, thank you, Councillor Munch, and I will let other members of council know. We will be polling for your consent and consensus to lower the flag today was the final day of our 215 hours of flag lowering to remember the Indigenous tragedy, and now this tragedy can be honored with the lowering of the flag if all members of council agree later today. Okay, any other council announcements? Okay, I see none, so we'll carry on. Is there any introduction of emergency or time-sensitive matters? Remember. Okay, I see none. We'll move to adoption of the agenda. Can I have a mover and seconder for that? Deputy Mayor Pirelli, Councillor Silovitz, seconding. Okay, any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? That carries. So any members of council have a disclosure of pecuniary interest? If so, state the general nature. I see none. Okay, we move to the adoption of previous council minutes. They can all be adopted in one motion. So I'm looking for one motion for special council meeting held on May 17th, the council public meeting on May 19th, and the council meeting held on May 26th. Deputy Mayor Pirelli, thank you. Councillor Barrows, seconding. Any discussion? All in favor? That carries. Thank you. Okay, we move to the items requiring separate discussion. Does anyone want to pull any of the items from the consent agenda? Any members of council? Okay, I see none. So can we have a motion to adopt the items, staff recommendations in all the items on the agenda? Deputy Mayor Pirelli, thank you, and Councillor Liu, seconded. Any discussion on that? Okay, all in favor? Okay, any opposed? I believe that carries unanimously. So we got unanimous consent for the adoption of all of the items on the agenda. We have no public hearings, but we do have two presentations. The first presentation is by Paulo Massaro, our Executive Director of Infrastructure and Engineering Services, and Stephen Senes, Manager of Corporate Asset Management, regarding the city's 2021 Asset Management Plan. This will be a 15-minute presentation. So go take it away. Go ahead, Mr. Massaro.
Thank you. Good morning, Acting Mayor and members of council. The Planning and Infrastructure Department is very excited to present Richmond Hill's 2021 Asset Management Plan. This is a good news story. Richmond Hill has prepared a plan that takes an evidence-based approach using data from our internally designed enterprise asset management software system, known as EAM. You'll hear a lot about that through the presentation. And that it generates outputs to inform our capital budgets and improve our forecasting process in a more advanced and sophisticated way moving forward. The asset management plan is in alignment with the term of council strategic priorities of fiscal responsibility, which is very important. And you will hear how Richmond Hill is 1 year ahead of legislative deadlines, since provincial regulatory requirements have been extended as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. However, the team has kept their foot on the gas pedal, and we continue to demonstrate that despite the challenges that we were faced with, we were prepared and we still delivered. And while legislation only requires asset management plans for core assets like sewers, roads, water mains, etc., Richmond Hill has created what we call Core Plus, which means we've included additional assets of our inventory into our plan that are only required in later years of part of legislation. Some good news is that as of 2020, 90% of Richmond Hill's core assets are in good or very good condition. The city's capital reinvestment into its core assets is currently sufficient for today. However, looking ahead for medium and long term, some gaps will become evident and a challenge if we want to maintain the same levels of service for those assets. So at this point, I'll hand the balance of the presentation over to Steve Tennis. He's our new manager of corporate asset management, and he's going to get into greater context. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Paolo, and good morning, Acting Mayor and Council. It's my pleasure today to bring this asset management plan to you today on behalf of my corporate asset management team. Next slide, please. As you can see from the timeline on the slide, asset management is a journey. In January 2018, the province enacted Ontario Regulation 588-17, Asset Management Planning for Municipal Infrastructure, to really help guide municipalities by specifying reporting requirements by certain deadlines. However, given the realities of COVID and other priorities, in March 2021, the province extended those reporting requirements by 1 year. Now, Richmond Hill, as part of best business practices, over the past few years has implemented a number of asset management improvements, of which the most significant was the development of the asset registry, the in-house EAM system, and the 3 strategies being the level of service, life cycle, and risk management. And these have all been incorporated into our EAM system. So as a result of these great improvements, the city has now been able to produce a 2021 asset management plan that, as Paolo mentioned, includes additional assets and analysis to achieve compliance with the regulation well ahead of schedule. It's also quickly important to note that AMPs are required for federal gas tax. Our asset management plan can now also forecast evidence-based investment needs and the impacts on levels of service and condition. And we're also able to estimate potential funding gaps. And last, this work is also feeding into our ongoing capital budget committee work and is informing the capital budgets and forecast, including suggested prioritization through the risk framework. Next slide, please. So our 2021 AMP includes core assets that are required by the regulation, and those includes roads, bridges, culverts, water, wastewater, and stormwater management assets. But we've also gone above and beyond that, and we've included the recreational facilities and active transportation within the right of way. And this is why we call our asset management plan Core Plus. The AMP then groups these into the type of services that the city provides and really addresses the following key questions. State of infrastructure, what assets does the city own and what is their replacement value? Condition, age, and remaining service life. Levels of service, how are we expecting these assets to perform to achieve the city's goals and objectives? Asset management strategies, these are the actions that must be taken to ensure the assets continue to perform at the levels we expect them to. And last, investment and financing strategy. And this really details what the investment needs are and how the city plans to fund those. The funding gap in our asset management plan has been identified, but it leaves the answer on how it will be funded as part of the budget process. Next slide, please. So this slide provides a high-level snapshot of the state of infrastructure of the city's Core Plus assets all rolled up. So you can see on the top left chart that overall, 97% of the city's Core Plus assets are in fair or better condition, with a letter condition grade A, very good. The top right pie chart shows the asset valuation of the city's Core Plus assets, and that's currently estimated at approximately $7.2 billion. And the bottom graph really summarizes the average age and remaining service life of the city's assets. And as you can see, most of the city's assets are relatively young, although roads is currently looking like it's past its halfway useful life. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned previously, 3 technical strategies were developed. I won't go into details here as our asset management plan includes full descriptions, but I will provide a few notes on each one. So the first important one was the level of service. And of course, these are extremely important because they really influence how asset management decisions are made to allow the city to provide services. And we've broken down the levels of service into strategic, customer, and technical. And we align them with all the strategic goals and visions of the city's master plans, corporate plans, and other related studies. Another strategy developed was the life cycle management strategies. And again, these are the planned treatments throughout the asset's life to maintain them, to make sure we can provide services. And the importance of these is that they really inform the EAM and the investment analysis and needs going forward. Last, the risk framework. And this really was developed to assess the likelihood and consequence of an asset failure, and it calculates a risk score. And through this process, we're able to support prioritization of capital investment needs and timing based on risk profiles. Next slide, please. So the investment analysis in the asset management plan really forecasted rehabilitation and replacement investment needs over a 10 and 25-year time horizon. And it was able to do that through the combining of the state of infrastructure, levels of service, life cycle strategies, and risk management with financial considerations. So we took a look at 4 scenarios. The first scenario is the unconstrained, which really is clearing out the backlog of past overdue treatments and undertaking interventions at their optimal time moving forward when they're needed. In some instances, condition levels improve over time. However, this required significant investment, so we needed to spread out that cost, and we developed the 3 additional scenarios. Scenario 1 was the status quo, which we looked at recent budget amounts with nominal increases in the future. Scenario 2 looked at the financial sustainability strategy and some of the assumptions that were built into those, along with the water quality protection reserve based on a new stormwater rate coming in 2022. It's important to note that we didn't look at drawdown of reserves and debts. That was not considered as part of this analysis. Scenario 3 then forecasted what is the level of investment needed to at least maintain or return to the current levels of service over a 10 and 25-year period. Last, we then defined the estimated funding gap as the difference between the status quo and scenario 3, maintain levels of service. And so the AMP identified what the gap is in compliance with the provincial asset management regulation, but we did not recommend how to fund that gap. And that is not a requirement of the regulation. Next slide, please. So for transportation, the analysis indicated that there's a backlog of approximately $47.7 million in backlog needs. And it's really important to note that it's common for municipalities to carry a backlog for roads because there's just a sheer significant volume of roads. Roads requires a lot of frequency of treatments, and they do have a shorter lifespan. So when this need was spread out, it was identified that to maintain the current levels of service, an annual investment increase of $3 million would be required. And this is represented by the solid green line in the right graph. And this speaks to the roads, approaching the end of their useful life, and there's going to be some need for investment going forward. Now, when we compared that to the status quo scenario 1, and that's highlighted on the red line in the graph, you can see there's no immediate funding gap, but there is potentially going to be a gap gradually growing over time. So this analysis suggests that while the current funding is sufficient for now, it's not sustainable over the longer term. So reserves and debts and other things as part of the financial sustainability strategy will need to be looked at. Next slide, please. So this graph really shows the power of the data that's coming out of our EAM system. So in alignment with my previous slide, you can see how the EAM is forecasting changes to the pavement quality of our roads under the 4 scenarios. The solid green line is the evolution of the pavement condition of the roads to maintain the service levels by the end of 2045. This really helps us understand and estimate the bang for our buck in terms of what the investment does to the condition over time. Next slide, please. So for water and wastewater, the unconstrained forecast indicated that we would need about $41.2 million to clear that backlog. So once again, we looked at spreading this out. So when we looked at the 10-year capital forecast and the financial sustainability strategy, and we averaged it out, there was approximately $6.8 million per year for water and wastewater R&R projects. And based on this annual funding level, a significant portion of the poor and very poor assets are addressed by the forecast, and the current service levels are maintained. So therefore, for water and sewer, we're not projecting at this time any potential funding gap. Next slide, please. So for stormwater management, the unconstrained forecast indicated that we would need close to approximately $19.8 million again to clear that backlog. Once again, when we took a look at the various scenarios to maintain the current levels of service, which is scenario 3, there was an annual average need of about $3.8 million in the first 10 years and approximately $5.7 million over the next 15 years. And when we compare those to the financing available in the status quo, there was an estimated gap of about $2.7 million in the first 10 years and $4.4 million over the next 15 years. And that is an annual average number. Next slide, please. For recreational facilities, there was a forecasted backlog of approximately $11.6 million. And in the similar vein as the other analyses, it was forecasted that the average investment per year would be needed of approximately $3.3 million for the next 10 years and $4.4 million for years 11 to 25. We didn't develop a funding gap for recreational facilities at this time, but we will going forward as a requirement of the provincial regulation deadline of July 1st, 2025. Next slide, please. So 2 additional requirements in the provincial asset management regulation is that municipalities need to provide a 10-year growth-related forecast and an associated 10-year operating cost forecast. And so the our asset management plan included a preliminary, and I underscore preliminary, growth-related capital forecast of almost $230 million. And that was informed by various plans and studies. You can see the spike in 2027, and that's due to the preliminary timing for the new North Leslie recreational facility potentially coming on stream. The AMP also took a look at the operating forecast, and based on the analysis, it would be increasing from approximately $30 million in 2021 to about $35 million by 2030, which is a nominal 1.8% annual growth rate per year. So the preliminary operating forecast used the 2021 operating budget as a starting point, and then we base the increase on the value of the new growth-related capital assets relative to the current asset base coming on stream. So the city is currently in the process in updating its OP and other master plan studies. And so these growth-related capital forecasts and operating forecasts will obviously get updated in future AMPs to reflect the most recent studies. Next slide, please. So we recognized that as part of asset management plans were evolving, we wanted to continue to build a stronger connection to the budgeting process. And so a lean process review was initiated, and that process has recently been completed. And now staff are in the process of operationalizing the results of that review for the 2022 capital budget and forecast. And so asset management's been able to provide forecasted capital investment needs information that's coming out of EAM for those core plus assets to really help departments and divisions as one source of input to develop their requested capital budget needs. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, the AMP improvements feed into the capital budget committee work from the recently completed lean review. It's going to help inform the 2022 capital budget process and forecast, and financing will be part of the capital budgeting process. If this AMP is approved by council today, we will achieve regulatory compliance 1 year ahead of schedule. Asset management is a journey. We've made a lot of great progress, but there's more work to be done. Thank you for the opportunity to present today.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Paolo. Thank you, Steve. Members of council, do you have any questions for the presenters? I guess at this time, I'm going to ask for questions, but I also want a motion on the floor to receive the presentation. So I'm sorry, I'm not seeing the full gallery of councilors. Okay, Councilor Silovitz, you're willing to move the receipt of the motion?
Yes, I
Receipt
am.
of the presentation. Thank you. I will just
Yes.
get a seconder and then you can speak. Somebody want to second the receipt of the presentation? Thank you, Councilor West. Go ahead, Councilor Silovitz.
Thank you. I don't have much to say other than to thank staff for all the work put into that. Thank you so much, Steve. Your graphs make it so plain and clear to us. I have full confidence in staff's ability to manage this on our behalf and the residents' behalf, and to ensure that we put the right foot forward at every possible instance. So thank you very much. Received with thanks.
Thank you. Okay. Councillor West, did you want to ask questions or speak to this? Just
Yes, please. Can I just clarify? So the motion is to receive this. Is that the staff recommended motion, or is there another motion coming after that?
yes, there will be a motion after that. It relates to item 13.3. So we adopted everything on consent, but that excluded the presentations on 13.3. It excludes 13.6 that had delegations.
Okay. I have a question, but do you want me to ask that now, or do you want me to ask that when we're dealing with the item
Now's
itself?
the time. Go ahead, Councillor West.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So just one question. So thanks for the presentation. This is obviously an incredibly foundational piece for the municipality, you know, given the size and the scale of the numbers that we're talking about here. Just can I ask, there was a slide, I think, that talked about the sustainability committee's work and all that type of thing. How do you see this report and the recommendations, assuming that they pass? What trigger then does that create for the financial sustainability committee? Like, how does this change or modify, if at all, the conversation on what we're talking about at the financial sustainability committee?
Mr. Massaro?
Yep. Through the acting mayor to Councillor West, thank you for the question. Steve did touch on it slightly in his presentation. The purpose of the asset management plan is regulatory in nature. The purpose here is to identify what infrastructure we have, the level of service that we want to maintain, and what our current gaps are. The discussion about how we're going to fund those gaps is separate from a discussion about the latter part that I just mentioned. So that means that once we can council approves this asset management plan, we can continue the discussion about how to. So the scenarios that Steve talked about discuss different alternatives. They did not include things like debt financing that have been on the radar for the last couple of years as far as different ways to fund some of those gaps. So what this means is that, to answer your question, that approval of this plan will allow that conversation to continue to find solutions along with our partners in corporate finance.
Okay, thank you for that information. So I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but I just want to make sure that I'm understanding this. So the data that is now being generated by this asset management plan is probably in many ways consistent with the types of conversations and expectations that we were having in the Financial Sustainability Committee. I mean, we now have more exact modeling and numbers, but the modeling and numbers that we've been talking about in financial sustainability now for quite a number of years is kind of similar in many ways to what the clarity that this report is giving us. Is that correct? I mean, there's nothing shocking or there's nothing surprising in any of the things that I've read. We kind of knew this already. Is that a fair statement?
To the acting mayor to Councillor West, that is correct. That is an accurate statement. We have now much more robust data that is being output that allows us to make evidence-based decisions. So we are doing things like comparing the water main replacement to the new fire truck and evaluating the risk of not delivering one of those and the importance of putting one before the other. And that's what we're very excited about, the ability when we do come back to council in the fall with our capital budget to demonstrate that all of this due diligence has taken place and we are making the most wise possible decisions and extending that $1 as far as we can for all the assets that we own. That is a correct statement.
Okay, and just to finish off, just to clarify, so all 444 municipalities across Ontario have to have this done in the next year. We're just a little ahead of the schedule at the moment. Is that right?
Through the chair to Councillor West, that is correct. Some municipalities have elected to take advantage of the provincial extensions as a result of the pandemic. We felt that since we had already kept our foot down and we're in the process of completing the plan, that we did not want to defer or delay. Let's demonstrate that we are still ahead, leading one of the leading municipalities. We like to think of ourselves that way here in Richmond Hill. But it also helps provide that better capital budget in the fall when we come at that time, a 1-2-step process. We thought that if we waited, we would rather adopt this plan because the one that we had before was from 2016, and we would rather use naturally more recent information. And that's what this allows us to do by coming to council today.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Paulo. And thank you, Steve. I don't think we've actually met. So it's good to see you at least in 2 dimensions. I'll hopefully recognize the 3rd dimension when I see it eventually. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you, Councillor West. I didn't see anyone else with questions. One thing I'd like to, Councillor Munch, go ahead.
Thank you for that. This particular area is an area of very big concern for me, but I want to go through some comments. Through you, the chair and the staff, are Steve or Bob or Paulo, are you aware of AMPS at all, AMPS?
Through the chair to Councillor Munch, if you're referring to AMPS being the asset management plan, that's what this is that we're coming to council with today.
So that's my point to other members on this council and others. AMPS is also in a tribunal that we have here internally, and the language different between AMPS from you and AMPS internally. So we have, when that algorithm is used, it can be seen different ways. So I'd like to have a situation where going forward, we reduce the potential for miscommunication, receive information, because AMPS is the alternative solution for bylaw, of which the residents are very familiar with. And the asset management plan is an internal document from management. And I would, I'll leave it with you, but I would ask you to try to consider maybe doing ASS or ASMPTS, so we understand it's asset management plan for the public to be able to differentiate AMPS versus AMP. Okay, number one, I'd like just to mention that. So in 2000, I don't know if you know this, I want to ask questions. When I first got elected, I started getting active in this file, and I want to ask the same questions I asked at that time. So when we go through our asset management plan and we say that we're a leading municipality, which is what I heard you say, how do we define a leading municipality?
To the acting mayor, to Councillor Munch, thank you for that question. It's one of the goals that I believe the entire department of infrastructure and planning strives to be. And one of, or a couple of the ways that we've demonstrated that is the fact that despite the extension of the provincial timelines, we are ready, whereas many other municipalities took advantage of the extension to not come forward. We're one of very few who still have come forward. Second, the legislative requirements or the regulatory requirements only require a corporate asset management plan for core assets. We've demonstrated that we brought more to the table today that allows us to provide better forecasts when we come in the fall with our capital budget. So by virtue of the fact of doing more than we were asked to, we're going to have to do it anyways. By virtue of demonstrating the fact that we've done more and we're ready to do more is another way that we've demonstrated that we're leading the pack.
When we go through our asset management plan, do we have a quantification as to how we prioritize or evaluate our assets? Meaning, are there actual numbers put to the life cycle of our assets throughout every asset of Richmond Hill?
Through the chair to Councillor Munch, the answer to that question is yes.
So
we have a very sophisticated system that can pin down each and every individual asset, its life cycle, its costs, and the amount and when interventions need to take place in order to extend the life of that asset.
Is that model going to be evaluated on when it gets adjusted? So how often is that model adjusted? There's a reason why I asked this, because I did this in 2015 and in 2016, and the discussion at that time was adjusted after the legislation changed. So I ask us, please, we were having a very important topic on this. because there's questions coming that are going to be quantitative in nature soon. I'm following my questions here. So do we have a quantitative method on every single asset that we are going through here? Every single one is my question. And
Through the chair to Councillor Munch, for core assets, the answer to that question is yes. For all assets, there are legislative deadlines that are further down the timeline, as Steve demonstrated in his presentation. So at some point, the answer will be yes for every single assets. Today, it is for core assets with some additional ones for active transportation and facilities.
And how do we, how often do we evaluate that model to upgrade it?
Through the chair to Councillor Munch, I'm going to defer this question to either Bob or Steve. They have more accurate data that they can provide in response.
Go ahead, Mr. Tsenes.
Through you, Acting Mayor, to the councillor. Currently, right now, as Paulo had indicated, we've got the Core Plus assets in there. We have a work plan and plan going forward to achieve regulatory compliance. Our plan is to try, and I emphasize try, to update the asset information on an annual basis. And I'm certainly being a little bit maybe ambitious and going out on a limb, but our hope is that we can update the data annually and provide an updated report to council every year. But I think that'll depend on a number of things, but that's certainly what we're trying to aim for, to come back and update that asset information on an annual basis and provide an update to council as needed.
Is there an intention or a concept that these funding for this is going to be growth oriented?
So through you to the acting mayor, to the councillor. The asset management plan deals primarily with the rehabilitation, replacement, and maintenance of existing assets. The regulation talks a little bit about how we have to show what our growth-related capital forecast is and the operating expenditures to maintain those growth-related capital assets. But in terms of pure growth-related capital forecasts, that is not particularly the main focus of the asset management plan or the regulation.
So where does the funding come from predominantly for funding these expenditures?
So through you to the acting mayor, to the councillor, primarily the funding for the rehabilitation replacement obviously comes through the tax supported capital budget and through the water quality reserves and the water and wastewater reserves developed as part of the budget process. So really what we're trying to do is provide some evidence-based analysis in terms of needs and then hand the ball over to the budgeting process to make sure that those can be considered and developed to address them over time.
So where are we as a municipality with regards to growth? Are we growing at an increasing rate or are we growing at a decreasing rate?
Through the chair to Councillor Munch, it's not the purpose of the AMP to determine to what extent we're growing. The purpose of the asset management plan is to identify what the current state of infrastructure is, our asset inventory, and what its current state is, and the gapping or funding that's going to be required in order to keep it in a state of good repair. So it's mostly a state of good repair exercise, not a growth exercise.
So, but would you agree to this? The region has declared that we are at the mature end of the life cycle in York Region. Do you believe that we're at the mature end of the life cycle or at the growth end of the life cycle or decline end of the life cycle as a growing municipality? Because as we have aging infrastructure and our infrastructure needs to be attended to, those growth numbers are incredibly important in order to fund future generations. And I just want to make sure that we are in line. If we're a leading municipality, are we in line with what the region has recently said in the last month? I'm just wondering if we're aware of that.
Councillor, I think the commissioner answered that. He said the purpose of the AMP is a state of good repair report on existing assets and is not related to the rates of growth for the city.
Okay, but if we have a situation where we're asking for money on EIS and then we go to funding later on, I'm wondering if we're going based upon actual numbers, if we're going by forecast numbers, how that's going to be, because I don't want the finance department to receive a bill and say, how are we going to finance this? And then they say, well, if we don't have the growth related to build, we then have to make it as a tax base, or does it have to go to reserves? And I'm trying to understand that conversation before it happens as to where we're going, because when it gets there, I want to make sure that we're aware.
So you got about 30 seconds left, Councillor Munch, and you're leading into a different exercise where our finance staff will be able to answer those questions, and we have that asset management sustainability exercise that's going to address a lot of the concerns you have. But Commissioner Massaro, did you have a comment?
Mr. Dexter raised his hand, if I may, as well. He was on the line there.
Through the mayor to Councillor Munch, yeah, if Director Dexter can add some context, that might be helpful.
Treasurer, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor, and thank you, Paulo. To help along there, right? This exercise and the great work that's done with the asset management plan identifies all the core plus assets in the town and the estimated timing for major rehabilitation, upgrade, and so forth, or replacement. Every year, as part of the capital budget and capital forecasting exercise, there's an assessment done. Mr. Tennis has indicated that that's the goal each year, to assess that. Once we know exactly what needs to be done based on the annual assessment in a capital budget, then we start talking about how it's funded. The whole asset base that the asset management plan identifies is either tax-supported capital program that's funded by levies to residents, or rate supported under the water, wastewater, or stormwater program. Growth assets don't apply in this. Once growth assets are onboarded, paid for primarily by development charges, then they come into this equation here as a part of the growing asset management plan. That's the only time it comes into there. So it's an annual assessment, and then the funding's derived from that. I hope that will answer your question.
Right. So this is, as we have a development charge discussion today, this all works in coordination with that. And since 2011, we have declined about a third of what our growth was. I'm really concerned about the sustainability of going forwards when we're declining from 3.18% to 1.02%. That's a third roughly of where we are. And I want to make sure that if we keep saying we're going to go, if we're growing at a declining rate and we're expecting development charge to go there, how is our asset group going to pay for that when we're not getting the money coming in? And I don't want to see our roads in disrepair. I don't want to see it. And by the way, just for the record, when I first got elected in 2014, 2015, I asked the question. And then when the legislation came in 2016, that's when we said—
Time's up, Councillor Munch.
I'll go for a second. Go ahead. I'll wait for a second.
That question. Commissioner Massaro, you want to address that?
No further comments at this time to address it. As stated earlier, the intent of the AMP is to address current assets. We are aware that through assumption, new assets come on board and they get added to our asset inventory. And then we're able to also forecast when those assets would require a rehabilitation or intervention of some sort.
Good. Thank you. So, Councillor Chen, you're next to speak, and Councillor Munch, you can continue on a second round if you want. Councillor Chen.
Thank you very much, Acting Mayor. First of all, I'd like to offer a comment and thank you very much, Executive Director Lorenzo and your team for providing a very concise presentation. I think that the active use of all those colorful display infographics, it helps to really try to present the relatively complex and technical matters in a very succinct manner for mostly non-technical people. So thank you for that. My question to Acting Mayor is that perhaps that's not intent, as Executive Director is talking about. I don't see anything regarding the financing or funding aspect other than the AMP, the asset management plan with all these dashboard kind of indicators would fit into the capital funding requirement or needs over the long term. However, I just want to get confirmation, isn't it not all the asset management plan development process as have been presented funded through the federal gas tax municipal funding agreement? And if so, is it a multi-year funding? Through you, Acting Mayor.
Commissioner?
To the acting mayor, to Councillor Chan, may I ask you to just restate the question, please, so I have better clarity on what is that you're acting. I'll try it first blush, but let me know if I'm going off on the off ramp. As stated earlier, most of the existing assets are funded through a variety of sources, whether it's rate, the water rate, water quality rate for stormwater, and or tax. Those are the primary areas for existing assets that are used. Growth related projects would be funded through DCs as a separate exercise. I'm not sure if that is answering your question though.
Thank you. I'm primarily looking for not so much internal funding sources, but external. That's basically is where I'm coming from. Okay.
Through the chair
So,
to through the acting mayor to Councillor Chan. Perhaps the city treasurer David can jump in and assist with the answer to that question.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Osorio. Through you, Mr. Acting Mayor. We use the repair replacement funding rehabilitation. It's largely tax supported capital reserves, and there are our own reserves. We do include federal gas tax monies as well. We receive about $6 million worth of that each year. So it is a part of that funding equation as well. As we go forward, we will continue to update our financial sustainability strategy, and that will also increase our funding toolkit to include intergenerational debt funding for certain significant large projects. That's an inevitability for every municipality, that there is a funding gap and then having to deal with it that way. So there's a number of funding sources, our own funds in the tax board reserve, gas tax monies, other grant monies that the levels of government may provide, as well as a possibility of debt.
thank you. I think that in the end, my final comment is that certainly this particular dashboard-like indicators will help to monitor in terms of life cycle of our infrastructure and help to, I gotta have a better sense of risk management as well as moving forward for the capital funding needs to ensuring our infrastructure really in the state of good repair. So in that front, I'm pleased with the staff putting the effort, not just showing the beautiful looking infographics, but really now we have a mechanism to really monitor from time to time how we're doing in terms of precisely what it is, managing our assets. So thank you very much, Acting Mayor, for allowing me the chance to seek some question regarding external funding. And thank you, staff, for making the presentation and continuous improvement efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chan. Okay, I had a question, but it really was asked and answered by Councillor West, as to how much of this our asset management is tax supported, and the answer is the bulk of it is. The bulk of this is our tax funded capital commitment every year. So it's so important that we get this straight and that we have our pencils as sharp as they could possibly be. I think we're definitely on the right track. And the more we can continue to assess risk and minimize that capital asset management cost every year is so important to the tax rate that we're ultimately going to have for our residents. It's huge numbers. Members of council have a $7.2 billion asset valuation corporation here. 7 billion of those assets are in good or very good repair, which is that it's an excellent statement. It needs to be highlighted. It needs to be mentioned. So it's a small portion of our assets need a little bit of work. We have a plan to do that. We have a good look forward, but we are merging this current snapshot of where we stand with our assets and what our requirements are with and contrasting with our growth, with our forecasted growth rates, we are attempting in every way to make sure growth pays for growth, but we are accounting for the fact that we're going to be less able to draw on development charges and less able to have growth paying for going back and servicing these assets that we already have. A lot of the things in this municipality were built new in the 80s and 90s, and they're now reaching 20 and 30 years into their lifespan and require remediation and work to be done on them. So that's where we're at. I think, Councillor Munch, you maybe want to go to second round, but I've got Deputy Mayor Pirelli who wants to speak now. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well stated. I think I just want to say thank you for staff for this work. It is very complicated. It's that complicated nature that allows us to pinpoint when the opportune time is to make those repairs and renovations and deletions from our inventory and about our inventory. So thank you for that. I just wanted to state that the reason our assets are in good shape or excellent shape is because of the commitment of this council and previous councils year over year to ensure that service levels remain where they are. And I, for one, would like to say that we will continue to provide that financial level of service to make sure that the residents of Richmond Hill's assets are properly cared for. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Massaro, for the presentation.
Okay, thank you. Before we potentially go to a second round, I want to clarify what we're doing now. I did get a motion, Mr. Clerk. Who did we who do we have as mover and seconder for receipt of the presentation?
To the acting mayor, Councillor Silovitz moved the motion and Councillor West seconded the motion to receive the presentation with thanks.
Okay, so Councillor Silovitz, would you be willing to bring item 13.3 forward and not only move receipt of the presentation, but also approval of the staff recommendations in appendix attachment A?
Yes.
Let's tackle it all at once. Thank you. And the seconder, okay with that? Very good. Okay. So that's what's on the floor. Just to be clear, item 13.3, the receipt of the presentation and approval of attachment A. So Councillor Munch, you wanted to go?
I can't share my screen, but I shared it with our treasurer yesterday. And just so everybody's clear, our trend line, I hope you do share it with our treasurer as opposed to making a report and going to him, because I'm very, very concerned, as we just said there, is that if we're not achieving our growth, we're not generating the revenue. And if we're not generating the revenue, then we have a problem funding our infrastructure. And as our capital comes from a portion of growth through development charges, and we are the second poorest housing municipality in Ontario, and that number potentially is going to get worse. That puts a tremendous amount of strain with aging infrastructure that Richmond Hill is now having. And I'm in Ward 2, where we have infrastructure challenges. We had a year ago where we had many residents have sewer coming into their basements. And it is a concern. We do know that our infrastructure is aging in certain parts of Richmond Hill. And as we are growing at a declining rate, it's important for us to, as council and as staff, to communicate to the public that where we're going is where we were and where we are concerned with regards to higher costs for putting our expensive infrastructure in place. And we don't want to have a situation, and I was going to say that I'm going to be moving a motion to bring capital and operating at the same time, not at 6 months apart, so that we can make sure that where there's a shortfall in capital, then we're going to have to move that to operating. Because as Councillor Pirelli said, I'm committed to the infrastructure of this municipality long term. And if we're not getting the growth related as a market or as a council wish, then we're going to have to bring that in the operating side. Because as was pointed out here, I, for one, am not in favor of bringing on debt in any way, shape, or form to fund today at the expense of the people tomorrow in this prosperous municipality. So we do have great management on this city, and we have great leadership with members of council. And I would hope that we could resolve with our treasurer as opposed to asset management, because when I asked the question in 2015, before the legislation regulation came in 2016, the numbers were dramatically different year over year, because as was pointed out in this conversation, we are regulatory required to do this. And it was also said in this conversation was we're leaders. Well, if we're leaders, we should be ahead of the regulatory, not behind the regulatory. And I would like us to absolutely be committed to that, because I am concerned about the water and wastewater and the sewer and the roads in our municipality that are aging, and we may not have the funding sources to accompany that, because our growth and our approval rates are so below our targets, yet the many residents.
Moment, Councillor Munch, I have a point of order.
Yeah.
Deputy Mayor Pirelli?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe what Councillor Munch is alluding to, and I'm not sure, but it sounds like he's saying he would like an opportunity to have a more in-depth conversation with staff. And since the legislative requirement isn't required at this time, we have a little bit more time. I would suggest maybe to the councillor that maybe he move a referral back to staff.
Okay, so point of order is not an opportunity for you to make, to give the speaker advice.
The point of order is not about giving him advice. It's that he's not speaking to the motion before us. So if he's not going to speak to that motion, it sounds like he's speaking to a deferral. And if that's what he's doing, I'd be happy to second that. Thank you.
Well, okay, I think you're on track with the asset management plan in your
So
questions. Go ahead, Councillor Munch.
just as we say, we're putting the plan together to go to finance for them to fund it. I really hoping, I'm okay to receive the report. I do thank the Councillor Pirelli for bringing it forward and making the comments, okay, in good faith. I'm very concerned to make sure that we're working collaboratively and not in isolation. And I want to make sure that this council understands and that the public and our management understand how important this is to make sure that the funding relationships are there so that you can plan accordingly, so we can get this, so we're not having a shortfall. We already see in the report here the shortfall that we have on every area, and with a funding decrease coming on capital, because we're just so you know, we're at a third of approvals that we were 20 years ago. 20 years ago, we had 3 times the money coming.
1 minute, Councillor.
Today, 20 years ago, we had 3 times the money for infrastructure that we have today. That concerns me when we have a shortfall and when I hear bringing on debt. So I say, please work. I would encourage you to work with members of council like myself who are very, very concerned. And I'm also doing a comparator with other municipalities. I'm doing, of the 440 municipalities, I am doing 80 of them. So when we talk about leadership, whatever said today, I will be doing a comparative to make sure that we are in line on the trending. And I've shared that with the treasurer. I'm happy to share more. I'm hoping you work with the treasurer and with our departments, because there's going to be tougher questions coming forward when this comes. Work collectively, work funding model, because I don't want to have a situation where people have sewer deposits going in their basement again. So I'm hoping we can do that. I'm still waiting for a staff report. I'm still waiting for other things to happen. But I say to you, I'm very concerned about having people have sewer deposits.
That's time, Councillor. Wrap up, please.
Thank you. Okay, that's it. I think you understand. I think we've had some conversations offline, very supportive, but I don't want to have a decline. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor, I think we can be fairly reassured. You know what's coming from this asset management plan and our capital sustainability work that we've done this term of council, that we are in good shape, and yes, we are behind on our growth targets, and but new growth will bring its own new infrastructure and new asset management requirements. So I have a motion on the floor from Councillor Silovitz and seconded by Councillor West to bring item 13.3 forward to receive the presentation and approve the attachment. All in favor? Any opposed? That carries. Thank you. Okay, the next item that is separated because there's,
Mr. Acting.
no, we're actually in delegations.
There's one more presentation, Mr. Acting.
Oh,
Yes.
I'm jumping ahead here. I'm trying to get off to enjoy this beautiful sunny day we have. But we do have a second presentation, and a very important one from our acting city manager, Darlene Jocelyn, regarding an update to council for planning a gradual and safe reopening. Go ahead, acting city manager.
She's muted.
Okay, can we unmute Ms. Jocelyn?
Sorry, my apologies.
There we go.
Through you, Acting Mayor and members of Council, I'm happy to be in front of you this morning to provide an update to Council on our COVID pandemic. Throughout the pandemic, we've been keeping Council apprised of how the city's been managing through the COVID restrictions to continue delivering our city services while also supporting the York Region Vaccination Clinic at Richmond Green. The last formal update to you was in December with initial hopes for the reopening of facilities to occur this spring. But as you know, much has changed since then. As you know, in April, the province has put us under another stay-at-home order, which continued through to June 2nd, which delayed the city's original reopening plans. The province then released a new framework for reopening, requiring the city to reevaluate our plans to align to the new criteria. Today, I'm bringing a formal update to Council to provide you with information on our updated plans for reopening, following the new provincial framework, including a recommendation on the timing for reopening the main municipal offices at East Beaver Creek. Next slide, please. Our priority has been and continues to be the health and safety of our staff and the public. While our facilities remain closed to the public, staff have continued to deliver services to citizens, sometimes adapting to new and innovative delivery methods. We believe we're meeting the vast majority of residents' needs within the constraints of the current COVID-19 restrictions. In addition, tax and water collection efforts remain good at 92% tax collection on due accounts and 88% of water bill collection on due accounts. Since COVID began, we have been digitizing more than 30 services to provide easier, more accessible services to our residents, while also improving the efficiencies of our operations behind the scenes. However, in some limited specific circumstances, we're allowing for scheduled in-person appointments. Appointments may occur for services that must continue but have no alternative method of delivery. This includes, for example, when a wet signature is required. In these cases, strict health and safety protocols are being followed to limit the risk to staff and to the public. We continue to take action to limit the number of people in our facilities in order to reduce the potential for exposure. Staff are working from home, meetings are being conducted online or by phone, and those required to attend a facility for essential purposes must complete the screening form, wear a mask, stay physically distanced, and follow other health and safety precautions. Thanks to these precautions and the diligence of our staff, we've been able to avoid any incidents of workplace outbreak while still providing the services that residents rely upon. In late May, as you're likely aware, the province announced its new framework for reopening over the coming months. And this week, the province announced that we'll enter into step 1 on Friday, June 11th, and the province would move us into the later steps no sooner than 21 days apart following step 1. It's important to note that with each of these steps will likely come some new health and safety guidelines and details about restrictions that aren't currently available, meaning that the city's rollout throughout these steps will take time as we respond to new rules and changes that the province may introduce. While we're keen to open back up to our community, we must also take a careful, safe, and financially responsible approach. There are still many unknown factors here. So our approach through the entire pandemic has been that safe careful, financial, responsible approach. Provincial restrictions and regulations are generally not communicated until the decision to move to another step is announced. Staff continue to be redeployed to our vaccination center and our summer parks operations. As is the case with the step one announcements, the regulations are just coming forward now. The province recently announced schools will not reopen for in-person learning until September, and many other municipalities are also not planning to reopen their indoor facilities or offices until that time at the earliest. This is also factored into our overall reopening plan. Next slide, please. The largest impact, this slide is to show you what's opened in Richmond Hill. There's a number of things that are allowed to be open, and this is our approach to advise council. The largest impact for service delivery through this entire pandemic continues to be Parks and Recreation Services. Parks and Recreation Services, specifically recreation, has had to pivot numerous times. In fact, on 24 hours notice, regulations continue to change continuously by the government. But even during the stay-at-home order, we continued to process permits for different films. We've issued ICE permits for the elite international athletes. We've continued to offer virtual programs and packaged activity kits that families can take home to do with their children. And it's been a great success, I must say, in delivering that new level of service. In line with the recent provincial regulations, we've already begun our gradual safe reopening. We worked quickly in late May to reopen our outdoor amenities that you can see in our parks following the latest provincial changes. One thing to note is that while the blue bin, green bin exchange and purchase program was put on hold during the shutdown order, we will be restarting online ordering this month, providing some home delivery until such time as the operations building reopens to the public. Next slide, please. In this slide is to show you what we anticipate to come during step 2 and step 3 and further into the September fall period. As we proceed through this provincial framework, our goal will be to quickly reopen select amenities, followed by a progressive reopening of the remainder of facilities and programs from September through to year end when we're permitted to do so. It's important to note that with each of these stages, we'll work as quickly as possible to open the planned facility. However, we need to note that the ongoing uncertainty of the timing and the complexity of the staff scheduling and many other factors may mean that we need to take a few days to several weeks to have them fully up and running. As an example, pools take at least a month to prepare and also require a regional inspection. Due to the prolonged amount of time that our pools have been empty of water, we must now slowly fill the water in order to reduce shocking the tiles and preventing them from cracking and popping. In terms of East Beaver Creek, while ground floor transmission work is targeted for completion in the coming weeks, under the COVID-19 protocols, we do not anticipate being able to accommodate all staff or the public at our main municipal office until September at the earliest. This is in line with York Region and other area municipalities, the province's decision on schools, and the anticipated timing for a majority of Ontarians receiving their second vaccine dose. This will give us time to adjust to the new health and safety guidelines and provincial directions upon entering step 3. There are still many unknowns right now in proceeding with step 2 and step 3. We anticipate needing additional cleaning efforts, extra security, staff to manage lines, screening forms, new signage, and time to reopening our parking here at the building, among many other things. Current restrictions, particularly in the elevators and washrooms, pose challenges for inviting a larger component of staff back to the office at this time. We also recognize that the more people there are in the building, the higher the potential risk of spread or workplace outbreak. We believe September at the earliest is a safe and responsible timeline for reopening East Beaver Creek to the public and our staff, and as such recommend that to Council. Until East Beaver Creek and the Operations Centre reopen to the public, we'll continue to deliver our services in alternative formats. If the province accelerates the rollout, we'll review that feasibility of doing the same based on those regulations that they provide at that time. However, I want to remind council that our recreation staff have been redeployed significantly across the corporation, and the majority of them are working within parks operations for summer operation support and for the vaccine clinic. So we need to stick to our plan there to provide those two high levels of service. There are also many unknowns until the province provides further direction on the coming steps of its framework, and we'll continue to reevaluate what's possible as we move through that, and we will update council as soon as we learn more. Next slide, please. In terms of communications, we'll be rolling out a comprehensive communication and marketing strategy to drive awareness of our reopening plans and to welcome the community back to our facilities. We'll start with a public service announcement in the coming days and with a steady stream of information throughout the summer months. We'll employ a variety of tactics, including but not limited to print and digital advertising, media outreach, social media, and signage. Our first phase, we're looking forward to seeing you soon, will announce our high-level reopening plan. The second phase, we're anticipating in July and August, is the we're getting ready to welcome you back. It explores some behind-the-scenes stories of the staff's effort to prepare our facilities for reopening. And then finally in the fall, we're open and happy to see you. We'll roll out as facilities open up to the public, and we'll be inviting our residents to come back to the city programs and services that we provide. And of course, as always, the city's website, specifically richmondhill.ca COVID-19, continues to be updated regularly as provincial guidelines change, impacting our operations and service offerings. It will continue to be the trusted source of truth for information on city services and facilities as we work to gradually reopen. Next slide, please. The recommendation that we have in front of council today is to ask that this presentation be received and that the recommendation to plan for the reopening of East Beaver Creek and the operations reception area to the public for in-person services in September be accepted. Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Acting City Manager Jocelyn. So members of council, Councillor Silovitz and then Councillor West.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. Acting City Manager Jocelyn, thank you very much for your comprehensive update and presentation. I just want to take this opportunity to once again thank you, City Manager Dempster, and every single staff member who have been involved in guiding our city and our residents and us as council through the pandemic. The job that has been done is just spectacular, and I am so proud of all of you. Thank you so much for the incredible hard work you've all done, literally flying by the seat of our pants, because there was nothing for us to use as a baseline here. So thank you so very much from myself, on behalf of all Ward 5 residents, and I'm sure all Richmond Hill residents. A yeoman's job was done across the board, and it is so impressive. You all deserve medals. Thank you so much. Secondly, I'll gladly move a motion forward to accept with thanks, and also to move the recommendation that we open the buildings in September. So we can put that on the screen, whatever the clerk wishes to do. I fully agree with only opening the buildings in September. It's in line with provincial regulations and what the school boards are doing. And I do believe it is a way in which we continue to protect ourselves and our community and our members of staff. And should we face a fourth wave in the fall, which is entirely possible, hopefully we'll have in place steps to guide us as we have to move forward in that respect as well. So it is expected that we will possibly have a fourth wave in the fall, but hopefully by then everyone has been, mostly everyone has been vaccinated, especially with their second vaccination, and they should be more than 90%, 90% covered. From someone who is still recovering from COVID and whose husband and life partner is still fighting very, very courageously for his life in hospital as a result of COVID infection, COVID pneumonia, and COVID complications. I just want to say here publicly that it is incredibly important that everybody continues to wear a mask when you are outside to protect yourselves. The Delta variant, which is also known as the variant from India, is highly contagious, and it has taken hold in Ontario. And it is probable that this variant will become the one that overtakes the other variants that are so highly contagious. Myself and Derek were infected with the B117 or Alpha variant from the UK, and we have to protect each other. We have to protect ourselves and our families and our loved ones, our neighbors and our community. So please continue to wear masks outside. It will save you, and it will definitely save those around you should you be asymptomatic. And please get vaccinated. It's of the utmost importance. Vaccinations are our way to control this epidemic, this virus that is trying so desperately hard to control us. So please get yourselves vaccinated, especially your second ones, as soon as possible. So that's all from me. Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. And again, Madam Jocelyn, thank you so much for everything.
Thank you, Councillor Silovitz. Thank you for those comments. Thank you for the motion, and thank you for your continued fight. We wish you all the best, for both you and your husband, at this trying time. Councillor West, did you want to speak, or you're just seconding the motion?
Yeah, I'd be happy to speak. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Jocelyn. That's a very comprehensive plan, and I am quite aware on one level of how intricate and how many moving parts this is. I don't profess to understand it on the level that you do, but I can imagine it. So thank you. I think the city has done a fantastic job in navigating this these very rough waters in the last little while, and I thank you for that. I'd like to add my thanks as well. I don't really have a lot to add to this. I'm fully in support of the plan. I think it's been well thought out, and it's holistic as a plan. And I think that's really the most important thing right now. But I will say that the only thing, there has been a significant amount of rethinking how we deliver some of the services and the digitization of things that we weren't necessarily offering before. And I would very much encourage staff as we move forward, because we're not out of this storm yet, but as we move forward, to continue to think of and remember and move forward on more of that where it's appropriate. Because I really think, once we get out of the pandemic, I think people will become more used to doing things in a digital way. And I think it's an opportunity for us to deliver some of the services in probably a more efficient manner than we've been able to do it in person only in the past. So anyway, I wanted to add that. I do appreciate the fact that we're offering delivery of blue and green bins. I think that's also an area that is important. Anyway, I very much happy to second this motion, and I think that again, I want to thank and congratulate staff for coming up with a really comprehensive plan. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor West. Don't see any other comments, so Mr. Clerk, could you put that on the screen, because the wording wouldn't actually appear in our agenda. It's simply to adopt the recommendations of the acting city manager. If everyone's good with that, I'll call the vote. Anyone need some time with it? Not able to see all of council at the moment. Okay. Looks like you're all ready to vote. Very good. All in favor? I see that's everybody. Okay, thanks very much. That motion carries. Okay. So that's it for presentations. Now we do move to delegations. And we had 3 of them, but one has opted not to speak to council. So there's 2 delegations. You'll have 5 minutes to address council. The first is Carol Davidson from 25 Green Meadow Crescent regarding our municipal elections voting methods. Ms. Davidson, are you here? Okay, the clerk is working on bringing in Carol Davidson, our first delegation today. And that's not possible. Maybe we can reverse the order and have Mr. Gursky speak first. Oh, I see. Ms. Davidson is on, appears to be on screen. Okay, very good. Okay, so Mr. Gursky, you look like you're ready. We have 2 delegations. You'll go first and Ms. Davidson will be next. You have 5 minutes to address council. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Esteemed members of council, I would like to speak to the issue of introducing online voting as one of the methods for residents to vote in the 2022 municipal election. A number of concerns were raised by some councillors at the last presentation on this topic, and I'd like to address those concerns. First, Mr. Barros. Mr. Barros says he only wants voters who are committed to vote, basically those who take the time to go to a polling station. Mr. Barros further alluded that he is not interested in people voting who only take a moment to check a box on their computer. Of course, this is a specious argument at best. It throws anyone with mobility issues, work-life demands, or who will continue to suffer from their COVID infection over the long haul and making it difficult to go out. They're all under the bus. So let's place Mr. Barros' argument where it belongs, in the shredder. Next, we have Mr. Pirelli, who seems to have friends pondering how to break the law by forging voter ballots online. Again, a meretricious concern. There is no evidence from all the studies on online voting that this happens or that it even can happen. So again, into the shredder. Next, we have Mr. Munch's argument that his constituents can be led by the nose and told how to vote because of their cultural or ethnic background. And somehow that online voting option feeds this.
Okay,
apart from the cultural insensitivity.
Mr. Gursky, you're taking a little bit of liberty with the words that councillors use that I just caution you to be careful with your comments.
I think I'm capturing the spirit of it.
Okay.
Okay. There is no evidence. Okay, sorry, Mr. Munch. Okay, apart from the cultural insensitivity of such comments, the argument has no basis in fact. And finally, we come to Deputy Mayor's argument, which is more sophisticated, namely that the sample size of support for online voting from the school board trustee election is not indicative of anything. That argument was blown apart by the Brock professor when she noted that the Richmond Hill results were totally in line with more than 100,000 responses in her research that found support for online voting as an option. And finally, we come to the bogeyman argument of potential security issues with online voting. So we should be careful. It's nice to know how these councillors care for us. There are and have been for some time totally secure online voting applications throughout the world. They've been proven and studied that Richmond Hill can use. So enough of the lack of security issue, please. We want residents to vote. We want a greater turnout for municipal elections, at least everyone I've talked to. So let's get with it. I didn't want to see members of council forever branded as insidiously fostering voter suppression with their cockamamie concerns. I have 1 minute left, so I'll just mention one other thing. The last time I spoke, Mayor Pirelli and I spoke about the zero budget position of certain councillors. Regional Councillor Pirelli waived the $2 million savings he and his core team of councillors managed by taking over the library board. At the time, I thought, great, way to go. I guess I was wrong to oppose the 0% budget dogma. Then I looked into this claim a little further and I'm appalled. The former board was made up of eminently educated and qualified people. The CEO was well-versed in running the library system. What we have now is councillors, with all due respect, I don't understand the value added as directors of the library board and their appointees, one of which can't seem to even attend the monthly meeting over the last 120 days. On top of this, in conversation, I find that staff are seeking early retirement. We're losing expertise needed to run the libraries, all for the 0% solution. I don't want to see the library budget cut. I want to see it grow based on expert analysis, not budgetary dogma. Cashiering qualified board members, stripping library funds makes no sense in the context of a multi-billion-dollar budget this city runs. I think with all due respect, Regional Councilor Pirelli, you and some of your colleagues seem to be confused about what is a cost and what is an investment. A windrow snow machine is a cost that depreciates and needs constant maintenance. A library is an investment in the education and edification of all residents, from toddlers to seniors. I suggest council reinstate the former library board and shift from cutting the library budget to investing, growing in our libraries. Again, out of respect, please do not harangue me unless I have the opportunity to respond to your utterances. If you have an item before you, please follow your procedure, state your case, and vote. Let your actions speak. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Gursky, and I will hold members of council to the item on the agenda, but you did waver a little bit away from our voting methods that we're discussing, that you were delegating on here. So I do differ with your opinion with regards to our library, and I think we have improved the service there, but we'll leave that for today, and we'll move to Ms. Davidson. Go ahead, Ms. Davidson, you have 5 minutes to address council.
Thank you. Voting in a free and fair election is a cornerstone of our democracy. In addition to voting in person with paper ballots, the option of online voting must be included in the 2022 municipal election to make it more inclusive and accessible to all Richmond Hill residents. Council Accountability Group, which I co-founded, recently posted a petition to urge this council to approve in-person and online voting options, which will allow residents to decide which method is best for them when it's time to vote. So far, 336 people have signed the petition. The COVID-19 pandemic has already changed our world as we do more living online, including this electronic council meeting. May I see the slide, please?
Slides. Okay.
In 2014 and 2018, Richmond Hill Council voted against electronic voting. In 2018, residents could only vote one way, by going to a polling station and marking a paper ballot. Just 27% of eligible residents voted. Next slide, please. Our neighbors in Newmarket, Aurora, and Markham were offered more flexible options, including voting online, by phone, as well as voting in person. In every one of those municipalities, voter turnout surpassed Richmond Hill. Next, please. Using Markham as an example, most candidates got roughly 10 times as many votes online as they did with in-person paper ballots. Markham Mayor Frank Scarpitti, for example, received 4,258 paper ballots and over 51,000 online votes. Clearly, residents embrace online voting. Next, please. Residents in municipalities that offered electronic voting options had more time to vote. In Newmarket, Aurora, and Markham, residents had between 10 and 11 days to vote, compared with Richmond Hill residents who had only 8 days to vote within specific hours at advanced polls or on election day. Online voting is available 24 hours a day. Next. At the May 12th council meeting, Dr. Nicole Goodman presented a survey on the October 2020 York Region School Board Trustee online election. She found that voter satisfaction was extremely high. A majority of voters encountered no issues voting. Internet issues were reported for just 2% of respondents, and preferred combinations of voting were methods including online, mail-in, and in-person voting. Thank you. That's it for the slides. While errors and mistakes can occur during any vote, there seems to be a heightened fear over security for electronic voting. Safety measures implemented by the city of Markham, for example, included hiring an independent auditor to test the online voting system prior to election day to ensure the voting process was secure and that votes were kept secret. Our clerk, Mr. Hike, has experience with online elections. I believe he knows how to protect our votes. We all know younger people live online, so electronic voting would encourage them to vote into the future. Think of all the things many of us do online. Bank safely, banking, submit our taxes. This year's Canadian census is only online. This council voted to accept Bitcoin as currency. If that doesn't show trust in security of online activities, I don't know what does. On May 12, Councillor Barrows said, quote, "The notion that, well, let's just make it easy for people. I'm sorry, I don't like that," end quote. He mentioned others' idea that if people can't get up out of their living room and make an effort to vote every 4 years, those people aren't serious about election outcomes. I strongly disagree. There are many barriers that stop people from making it to a polling station. Many people have mobility problems and other health issues. Anyone caring for loved ones is limited in their ability to leave their home. Parents caring for children, working moms and dads can't always get out to vote. We're lucky to have a diverse community in Richmond Hill, and democratic elections may be rather intimidating to someone who has not had an opportunity to vote before. Online voting is private. Online voting is not about making it easier for lazy people. It's about inclusivity, making it possible for all residents to participate in our election and have a voice. For members of this council, changing the way we vote is probably scary. You were all elected with just in-person ballots. But by modernizing local elections with flexible voting options, residents will respect you for doing the right thing. It's imperative that voting rights be extended to as many people as possible. Please join other municipalities and approve an online component for the 2022 elections. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Davidson. Okay, does someone want to bring forward item 13.6 then, and we'll go into that. That'll be the next item naturally occurring on the agenda anyways. So we'll go to item 13.6. Councillor West.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the delegates, and thank you to those that participated in the online petition that was received by the clerk's office. There's no question in my mind that this is the right time to do this, and it's the right thing to do. There's a bunch of reasons why I think it's a good idea, and I'm not going to have time to go into all of them with 5 minutes, but I think, on page 6 of the staff report, it's very well documented in the staff report as to what those reasons are. And one of them is the uncertainty around the COVID pandemic and any lingering, uncertainty that people have about wanting to, be in a polling station with other people. I do appreciate the fact that in this plan that there will be the ability for people to have an option to do in-person voting and online voting. I think that actually is a sweet spot for capturing as many people as possible. The fact that other municipalities, in fact, I think it's over 150 other municipalities have already done this, including Markham, and have been successful in doing that. I think that is very important. And I think that, this is not necessarily a thing that we want to be the leaders doing things first. I mean, but given the experience that others have had, and including the school board election, I think that the pitfalls and the bumps in the road are very well known. And I have no question, given the presentation by Ms. Goodman, or Professor Goodman the other day, Dr. Goodman, and our clerk, I think that we know what those pitfalls are, and we're ready to be looking at it. In fact, in the staff report, it says that there are a number of concerns that linger, and there will be with any new technology, and that the clerk is still committed to making sure that this is done in a way that is secure and safe, and and is in all the different important aspects of our democracy. So I'm happy to do this. I think that, we spend a lot of time in Richmond Hill, and rightly so, making sure that people understand that we're a progressive community and that we're ready to do things well. And I think that, allowing our voters to vote in an online way and having that option, I think is definitely consistent with that message that we've always tried to send out. So I'm happy to move this. And those would be my comments for at this time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor West. I got Councillor Barrows and Councillor Chan next to speak. Councillor Barrows, are you willing to second the motion? Or should I?
Not at this point, but can we see what the motion actually is?
I'll definitely let you speak, but can I get a seconder to the staff recommendations? Okay, thank you, Councillor Silovitz. Go ahead, Councillor Barrows.
Thank you very much. I continue to have concerns when it comes to security. I guess my question to the clerk is, provincially and federally, have they fully introduced electronic voting to the province of Ontario and to the federal elections, Elections Canada and Elections Ontario?
Mr. Clerk?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Acting Mayor. No, the federal and provincial government have not introduced electronic voting.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. So when I take a look at our parents, which is the province of Ontario, they provide us with the Elections Act, with so many things, and they haven't stepped forward yet in electronic voting. I find it difficult to just ad hoc kind of go ahead with something. And it's interesting because on page 10 of the report, we're still not clear on if this is safe. And the statement is, it is the clerk's intention to only deploy the internet voting system if the service provider is able to satisfy the clerk as part of the comprehensive system security that the system meets the security requirement to comply with the principles of the Act. Given that we have to put that in there, that we're still not 100%, we'd have to be convinced. That leaves too much doubt in my mind, and I'm sorry, but I would like to have it available for those with accessibility issues. I completely understand, the situation where some people may not be able to take advantage of the proxy vote. But I think that until we actually have this complete certainty around the security of this, we'll have to wait. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Chan?
Thank you, Acting Mayor, and thank you, the delegates for expressing their views. And I just want to state for the record, as I've done in past council meetings, when this topic of online voting has been proposed, this term, past terms, I am in support of being more inclusive, to include the online voting in upcoming municipal elections and thereafter. And the fact that the last by-election for the school board trustee has shown that not only our clerk and his team were able competently to also conduct that, but also is make reference to Dr. Goodman's presentation not too long ago, that the overwhelming majority of the voters were satisfied with the process. And there was the issues that had been concerned about security and so on, based on what we have seen today, have no significant impact whatsoever. And I think that while the other levels of government in Canada may not have stepped forward at this point in time, I think it's pretty compelling to look at particularly one of the delegates to show not only our neighboring municipalities, never mind, other places in BC, Alberta, or other provinces. Not only they have included the online voting, which is not a subject matter of today, but also in terms of thinking about increasing the number of days of voting, particularly on advance vote. But getting back to online voting, which I'm in support of. And I think it's also interesting that on the same page 10 that being referred to by the former speaker, on the page 10 report, in fact, the last sentence of that paragraph related to internet voting is say, I would repeat here, the use of internet voting for the 2022 municipal elections is an effective tool to address any potential lasting COVID-19 changes relating to people concerned about congregating in large groups. So there's one point. The other point is that the report prepared by staff clearly indicated this is with the additional online voting on top of the paper ballot which is also relating to the optical center they're asking for permission, would all be within the budget already contemplated by the clerk. So on the basis of one, that the inclusion of the online voting would really send a very strong message to voters that Richmond Hill is ready to be inclusive, to be really expanding on the modes or methods of voting to accommodate not only changing times, but the issue and concern about accessibility, mobility have been talking about. And the third is everything is within budget, and the particular point about security. And to date, as indicated that by both the delegates, and I don't see particular significant concern being raised by staff in reporting that security is an issue. And neighboring Markham already have been done it at least about 5 municipal elections, and there's no particular issue on that. So I'm in support of the motion in front of us, Mr. Acting Mayor, and for the record, and I think this is time for Richmond Hill to be entering the digital world in terms of empowering and expanding opportunity for all residents that who can vote anytime within those allocated day and time. Well, actually, you can vote 24/7 that with online voting. So thank you very much, Acting Mayor, for me to state my view and for the record.
Thank you, Councilor Chan. Deputy Mayor Pirelli.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too agree that, we need to be inclusive. I think we are inclusive. I don't think the city of Richmond Hill in any way, shape, or form has ever suggested that we are not an inclusive society. But I guess some people feel that we're not, and that's okay, because we're all entitled to our opinions. I think what's interesting too, since the last time we spoke, I heard a presentation last time about the actual impact of internet voting as it pertained to voter turnout. And if I recall correctly, Mr. Chairman, through you, there was very negligible increase in voter turnout. If Markham has more turnout, the study doesn't indicate it's from internet voting. It just happens to be that under those circumstances, there's more people voting. I would suggest that every election is different. And when you have, for example, a big challenge at the mayor's race, it gets people excited and they want to come out and they want to support their candidate, and therefore increases turnout. It's things like that that get people excited and motivated to come out and speak, not the fact that it's easier. I also agree with my colleagues and the delegates that spoke that it's important to make sure that everybody who wants to vote has an opportunity to vote. And I'm open to having, for example, we have proxy voting. Now, proxy voting has worked great for 100 years, and we get people to take our ballot in, someone we trust. It would be the same level of trust we would do if somebody was disabled and said to their significant other, could you please, vote for Councillor Barrows for me, for example, and, handle the computer. So since the last time that we spoke about this subject, I asked someone who I respect in the cybersecurity world, my own son, my firstborn, happens to be a leading expert in cybersecurity. He protects one of our government infrastructures. And in speaking with him, father to son, he has very serious concerns because, as he put it, and of course the son is now educating the father, we don't know what we don't know until it happens. So when you look at the success of internet voting, We say it's successful because nobody's exposed any serious corruption. It hasn't been caught. But when you have a mayor like Frank Scarpitti, who gets a majority of the votes, a large majority of the votes, if there was any kind of corruption or fraud, it probably wouldn't register so easily. But you know, if you look at historically elections, sometimes it comes down to a handful of votes. And by a handful, I mean 5. Sometimes 1 vote is enough. If we look at the nomination of our own provincial candidate, it came down to 1 vote. And Ms. Daisy Way became our candidate as opposed to someone else. 1 vote. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 1 vote. So it's important that we protect every vote as best we can. So I'm open to an amendment to our policies that would say, you know, if somebody has a disability, they cannot get a proxy vote. I'm sure that the numbers are very small, and I would be encouraged to set up a program where we could send someone to their home to get their vote in person. But what really sticks in my mind is we don't know what we don't know. And most recently, some of you will recognize that one of the most secure and protected areas of our internet world, Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, has been hacked. And that's a scary, they talk about blockchains, things that I don't understand. But the last thing I want to say,
you got to wrap it up there.
Yeah, thank you. The last thing I want to say, Mr. Chairman, is this. Every municipality, every government has ransom policies. These ransom policies say that when, not if, when we are hacked and we need to get our data back because somebody's out there more clever than we are, here's how much we're willing to pay to get that information without going to council. And that exists in every municipality, at every level and in every corporation of any significance. So when you take all of that into consideration, you got to ask yourself, for the 1 or 2% that it may increase voter turnout, is it really worth taking that chance? And the answer, sadly, is no, it's not. So I will not.
That's way past time. Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Yu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I approach this topic seriously with an open mind. And first, I would like to thank staff for doing that presentation a month ago. I learned a lot and I have more understanding. And I, after that presentation, I did some research, which there's no doubt there's lots of benefits about online voting. And the most I've been hearing is convenient. But after doing some research, I can see that convenience comes with a cost. On March 4th, 3 months ago, there's an article by a Western University professor, Alexander Access. So I quote, "If municipalities use online voting, they are exposing themselves to cyber, legal, and reputational risks." Also quote, "There's an internationally established principle for democratic elections that the foundation of trust and integrity must be a secret ballot. Online voting has no such provision." And I also look at the 444 Ontario municipalities. There's only 194 of them in 2018 actually used internet voting. And when I look at the voters turnout, no doubt, in 2003, when Markham first started doing online voting, the voters turnout increase is significant. But since 2010, 2014, 2018, I can see the increment is only by 2%. City of Guelph just announced that they will abandon online voting because of security concerns. Speaking about Newmarket, Newmarket introduced internet voting in 2018. 10 days of continuous voting was offered. Voters' turnout remains the same. Aurora introduced hybrid model in 2018, internet voting in advance poll and paper only on election day. 22% utilize online voting. So as much as I appreciate online voting, is a trend, but I don't think it's the time for Richmond Hill. When I look at the vaccinations clinic, the numbers of seniors, they can't even go online and book an appointment, troubles me. And talking about, okay, well, pandemic is going to, maybe a fourth wave, it's going to linger on. We have a federal election and a provincial election in front of us. I don't see them using online voting. Not that I'm disputing the fact that, online voting has its advantages. However, I just don't think, I'm not 100% convinced at this moment that online voting is a goal for Richmond Hill. Maybe next election, I don't know. But as of now, I'm not 100% convinced. And I base my decision on very logical and facts. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Liu. Councilor Silovitz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll second the motion that Councillor West has put on the floor. I don't believe there's been a second yet. I fully support it. I believe that online voting is a necessity, and I fully support the hybrid model where residents have a choice. I have absolutely no doubt that our clerk's office and our clerk, who is in charge of our municipal elections, will put in place a system that's verified and 100% safe. So I've said this before, as the chair of our Accessibility Advisory Committee, there can be no question that online voting is absolutely essential. And in our era of COVID, there is a possibility that a lot of people next year in October, and come the municipal and federal elections, and we don't know yet whether or not they're going to allow online voting. So let's hold our horses on that. I don't think any definitive decision has been made. If I need to be corrected, go ahead. So I think that we're leading the way here. Other York Regional municipalities have done so. And I really look forward to the city of Richmond Hill offering this to our population, because I do believe that we will see far greater interest come election day, and advance voting and all of that. And hopefully we'll see those that really dismal number rise quite a bit. I want to thank Ms. Davidson for the charts that she put up. That's excellent research, and it laid it out very clearly for everybody. So when you do take Markham as an example, they've been doing it for years, and I don't believe that Markham has ever had any major concerns. There's always a concern. There's a concern with person-to-person, in-person voting as well. There's always a concern that there could be some type of fraud. But I think as we move forward in this electronic age, and in an age where we've learned to do so much more electronically, and hopefully more firewalls are put up and everything is in place to protect the vote, I fully support a hybrid model, because it gives our residents the choice. And so I ask for a recorded vote. And if you want to separate each ABC out, that's fine too. But I second this and fully support it. And I look forward to it. And I think the majority of our residents, those I have spoken to, those I have had conversations with, I think they would absolutely support something like this. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Silovitz. And, I too think perhaps it's time, and given that we would be given the clerk a green light to introduce a hybrid model, only where he feels that it's absolutely meets the provincial guidelines, and he's able to do so in a safe and secure way. And I also am concerned that because of this prolonged stay-at-home order and lockdowns, I'm not sure if we're going to perhaps have some bouts of agoraphobia among our residents. We're going to have to encourage our residents to get back on public transit, to get back to our facilities and our pools, and just to get out. And there's a reintegration process that has to happen. And being just over a year away, I want to make sure that we improve upon our dismal voter turnout rate in Richmond Hill and do whatever is necessary. So that's where I stand. Now, I've only seen dissenting opinion with regards to item C. So what I'd like to do, if Councillor West and Silovitz are okay with that, is put to a vote all of the items in the staff recommendation except for C, to put that to a vote in order to endorse and approve the essential elements of the election that need to happen. Our clerk needs to get a go-ahead at this point in time to start all of these other functions. I didn't hear anyone that's opposed to authorizing the clerk to go ahead with all these other items. And recommendation C is the only one that pertains to internet voting, and we can vote on that separately if that's okay with the mover and seconder. Okay, I see heads nodding, so that's what I'll do. Deputy Mayor Pirelli, did you want to speak again before we go to vote? Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do believe Councillor Barros also had his request to speak sign up before me.
Okay, he can speak after you if he does want to go again on a second round.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, Mr. Chairman, unlike some of my colleagues, I am pleased to report out that I was amazed during this pandemic how people went out and helped people. On the very first day of the opening of Richmond Green Vaccination Center, it was a very cold, snowy day, bitterly cold, actually. Mr. Chairman, there were people in their 90s, very immobile, in their chairs, being surrounded by their loved ones to be brought to get their vaccination. This is the type of spirit that I see in Richmond Hill and throughout Ontario and Canada, for that matter. We are very special. I don't believe that looking at our seniors like people that, or someone with a disability, that they, woe me, we can't get to a polling station. I don't believe that's the case. I've never heard anybody ever in all the elections I've been involved in say to me, I wanted to go and vote, I simply couldn't get out there. Now, I've heard those comments, but the reasons were I had other things to do. I had to work, for example. Sometimes that's reasonable. Some employers didn't give them the time off to go. That's concerning. But our proxy system has worked very well for that and has allowed people to come and vote. Like I said, Mr. Chairman, earlier, as Councillor Liu pointed out, we're looking at the statistical facts. And the facts are that although it may be more convenient, it does not increase voter turnout by virtue of it being more convenient. Statistically, 1% to 2% increase is a statistical non-increase. So as much as I'd love to provide that extra level of convenience, I'm not prepared at this time to do it at the risk of there being something happen that we can't anticipate. In other words, we don't know what we don't know. And so, again, at some point in the future, Mr. Chairman, if the clerk would like to come back to us and say, look, we want to address the comments and concerns of the council that were brought today. And we want to be able to add a few days where maybe a team of clerical staff go out to homes. I can't imagine there's lots of them. I can tell you statistically, Mr. Chairman, that out of the over 7,000 people that responded to the Enviro Day event, 53, I believe, was the number of people that didn't have access to internet. But you know what, Mr. Chairman? They were able to call, we were able to communicate with them, we sent them a letter, they will still be able to come. And where there's a will, there's a way. And I think we'll be able to accommodate anybody and everybody who wants to vote. You know, back in the day, we used to hear about people sending buses around to pick up residents and bring them to the polling stations, right? And there'd be the Liberal bus, and there'd be a Conservative and an NDP and a Green bus, and they'd go around and pick up people who didn't have transportation to the. I think where there's a will, there's a way, Mr. Chairman, but I'm not prepared, for the sake of convenience, to have all those unknowns and risk a potential outcome in an election that wasn't anticipated or even known. We may not even know. A simple 2-vote swing could declare one person a winner and the other one not. So too much risk for me, Mr. Chairman. I'll have to vote no for C at this time. And when the clerk, and if the clerk.
The time's just come up now.
Oh, time's up.
Wrap it up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Barrows, I thought maybe you just wanted to ask to separate the items. Did you want to speak on the second round?
No, exactly. I was just looking to remove item C so that I could vote on that separately. So thank you for that.
Yeah, that's what I guessed. Councilor Munch, you haven't spoke yet. Go ahead.
Good day. I'd just like to say thank you for the new information through Councillor Liu. That had a, that's why security and safety is very, very important to me. And when you hear other municipalities who have gone down that route who are now going back, I mean, that I got first elected on the Canada Post on safety and security of our information. Safety and security and fraud is the #1 crime in the world. And when you hear that other municipalities in our area are doing that, I'm surprised members of council aren't heeding that, because safety and security of our system is paramount. Furthermore, that our provincial and federal government haven't engaged, and they have elections before us. I think it's interesting. So we have a municipal sector who are saying, hey, we've got some challenges and we're rescinding it. Your provincial and federal government aren't doing it yet. We're doing it now. So I find that interesting leadership, and I look forward to the recorded vote. Thank you.
Munch. Okay, so I've had a request for a recorded vote. Councilor West.
If I could, as a mover, if I could just wrap up, Mr. Chair. So I actually had forgotten, I think, I vaguely recall being on council a number of years ago, I can't remember what year it was, where this item did come up. And I'm not positive, but I'm fairly sure, I'm likely that I voted against it at that time. And I would have voted against it at that time. Like, this would have been back in 2014, 15, something like that. And I think the reason is that there was unknown, and I was probably afraid of all of the unknowns. I think the difference between now and then, though, is that the unknowns are falling off very quickly, because we've had so much collective experience with this. The comment about, you don't know what you don't know, I can't believe that's actually entirely true, because I'm sure that this has been studied to death. And people like Dr. Goodman, for example, and others, would definitely have looked into this and looked at the efficacy and the security and all that type of thing of this process. I do appreciate the research that Councillor Liu has done, and I've actually done my own research as well since the 2014-15 when I wasn't in favor of it, and today. But I want to also just touch on a couple of things very quickly. This is not entirely about helping with voter turnout. I have no doubt that it will, and I think most people that have studied this have said that it does have some degree of a bump in voter turnout. It's about inclusivity, and inclusivity isn't just about people who are not physically able to get out of the house and vote. There's an enormous number of barriers for inclusivity, and it's not like Richmond Hill isn't a non-inclusive community. I mean, we're an inclusive community, but the reality is that we can always do things that increase inclusivity as time goes on, as things change, as we identify other barriers to voting and other things. So this to me is a step in the direction of increasing that inclusivity. And I think really that's what it's all about. Will it increase voter participation? Yeah, probably. Will it increase voter participation over the longer term as we do this again and again and again over the years? Yeah, more than likely. So I don't think, I want to make it clear that I don't think anybody has ever said that this is all about voter participation. It's one aspect of it. So I think, you know, I'm more than happy to support this, and I really hope that council members will support it, because anybody that I've spoken to has suggested that this is the way of the future, and it is something that they are expecting from our elected representatives. So those are my comments. I'll leave it with you, Mr. Chair, and we'll call the vote.
Okay, thank you, Councillor West. So your motion is the staff recommendation, but I'm going to separate it, and the clerk is going to conduct 2 recorded votes. Turn it over to you, Mr. Clark.
Thank you. Through the acting mayor, voting on clauses A, B, D, E, and F of the main motion. So that excludes clause C related to internet voting. Councillor Silovitz.
Yes.
Thank you. Acting Mayor DePaula.
Yes.
Thank you. Acting Mayor, there's
okay.
2 requests
Yeah.
to speak.
Okay.
Apologies. Yep.
Go ahead. Deputy Mayor Pirelli first, and Councillor Munch.
Just want to see the motion on the screen that we're voting on.
Point of order. Okay, well, it's the staff recommendation.
I don't.
Okay.
Thank you. Give us a moment to digest that. Please.
What are we voting on exactly?
So the first vote is everything except for section C in this recommendation. Everything in the staff recommendation except for C that pertains to online voting. So all the necessary functions the clerk needs to conduct the election. So you want to continue with the recorded vote?
If members of council are prepared for me to continue, I'm happy to.
I'm not done reading. If I could have another minute, please. Thank you.
It's important when we're voting that we have the motions on the screen. So I'd hope that we can remember that.
We do that when it's not verbatim, word for word, staff recommended, circulated since last Thursday.
Thank you. But for all of us, for full transparency and accountability, and to make sure that what is down, it's important for us to know what's on screen, especially in this world of digital era, that everybody knows. And what happens if there's a discrepancy between what we're voting on and what's there. So I think it'd be a polite and really responsible way to, whatever we're voting on, that we actually see what we're voting on. That would be my preference. And I'm going to ask that on going forward. So I hope everybody understands that and the clerk heeds that, my concern. Thank you.
Appreciate your concern, Councillor. We're going to continue with our what we do, and that is to display any motion on the screen that it deviates in any way from what is in the published agenda.
Through you, Mr. Acting Mayor, if I might just, the reason why we don't always display everything, there is screen real estate issues that occur that people can't see each other, especially when it comes to hand votes. That is probably why, but we're always happy to display. If I may continue with the vote, Mr. Acting Mayor, I have taken the vote of both Councillor Shilovitz and yourself, if I might continue.
Okay, please
Thank
do. Well, councillors, are you, raise a card if you're not comfortable going forward.
So, thank you.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Pirelli, still looking for more time.
Yeah, no, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to make a quick comment because of what I've heard. I
We're
agree.
in the midst of a recorded vote, so we're not
Well,
gonna.
well, Mr. Chairman, please allow me a little bit of latitude here. I think it's very important to recognize that when I'm voting, I want to see what I'm voting on the screen. It's our rights as an elected official to actually ask the clerk to read the motion, but I'm not going that far. I just wanted to read it because I cannot be certain in this digital age that what is written on the staff agenda that I read yesterday and this morning is what's going to be on the screen, and I don't want to make that assumption.
Absolutely, councillors, you always have the right to ask for it to be displayed. I'm just saying we normally don't display it, you know, unless it deviates from what's in the published report. But yes, councillor, you always have a right to ask to have the motion displayed before we vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Are you ready to go ahead forward?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Okay, two of us have already voted. Go ahead, Mr.
Yeah,
Clerk.
thank you.
continue.
Through Mr. Acting Mayor, just for the record, just Councillor Shilovitz had voted in favor. Yourself have voted in favor, and we are voting on everything but clause C. So regional and local, Councillor Pirelli.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Barrows.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Chan.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor West.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Munch.
Yes.
Thank you. And Councillor Liu.
Yes.
Thank you. So clauses, all clauses except clause C have carried unanimously. Now voting on clause C to authorize internet
See
voting.
what is printing.
Councillor Shilovitz.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Chan.
Yes.
Thank you. Acting Mayor DePaula.
Yes.
And thank you. Councillor Barrows.
No.
Thank you. Councillor West.
Yes.
Thank you. Regional and local, Councillor Pirelli.
No.
Thank you. Councillor Munch. Just verbalize that, please, Councillor, for us.
Sorry about that. No.
Thank you. Councillor Liu.
No.
Thank you. Clause C fails to carry on a tie vote, so only clauses A, B, C, A, B, D, E, and F of the motion have carried. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. There we go, members of council. We've got at least the clerk set the task with some parameters for the next election. We're conducting that. Now we move forward. The next is also going to showcase the clerk, and this time he's going to present us with a verbal update regarding Mayor Barrow's medical leave of absence as directed by council at our last meeting. So, Mr. Clerk, go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry, I apologize. I was just trying to record that. Yes, through the acting mayor and members of council, there was a request at the most recent council meeting for Mayor Barrow to provide some update to council on his medical leave of absence. He has sent me an email requesting that I read the following out at this meeting. It says, "Hello, members of council. I would like to thank you and the residents of Richmond Hill for all the kind words and thoughts I have received since I went on medical leave at the end of February. The medical treatments I have been receiving have been going well. At this time, I am hopeful that I will be able to return to work at the end of the summer. Dave."
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Clerk, and welcome news to hear that our mayor is progressing well. Look forward to hearing from him, and he sounds hopeful about his return. So there's there's no motions or recommendations with regards to that. So I'll move to the next item if I don't see any members wanting to comment. Okay, so the next is a petition submitted on, well, can we just have a motion to receive a petition submitted by Marion Nally regarding municipal elections?
Yeah, I apologize, Mr. Acting Mayor. We normally would consider that to have been received on consent anyways.
That's what I would have thought. Okay, so 13.9. So the only remaining item there is a member motion by Councillor Munch for us to deal with. So Councillor Munch, you have the floor. You would have to move to add your motion to our in-camera session.
So I would ask that we move my in-camera motion into a vote for members of council and go forwards, please. Is that what you're asking? You're asking me to move it forward, so we do that?
Well, it is required to be added to the in-camera agenda in order for us to discuss it. Mr. Clerk, would you have wording to help the council?
Through you, Mr. Acting Mayor, consistent with what we have done in these cases in the past, at this time, it would be appropriate for Councillor Munch to move his member's motion as it appeared in the public agenda. If that is seconded and subsequently carried on a majority vote, we would then, by virtue of that, add to the closed session agenda. So it would be necessary for his motion to carry first on a majority vote for us to include the actual discussion in closed session.
Okay, so it's your motion as written, and please put it on the screen, Mr. Clerk. You've got, it's a member motion with several whereases, but that we resolve that council approve resolving into closed session meeting to discuss personal matters of an identifiable individual at the June 9th, 2021 council meeting. So council would have to vote in favor of this in order to add it to the closed session agenda. Okay, any discussion on that? It looks like members are ready to vote.
I do not have a seconder yet, Mr. Acting Mayor.
Okay, anyone willing to second this? I see Deputy Mayor Pirelli waving his yes sign. So we have moved by Councillor Munch, seconded by Deputy Mayor Pirelli. I still don't see anyone requesting to speak, so we can go to a vote. Okay.
Do you want me to stop sharing so you can see all their hands?
It's on the screen. No, leave it on the screen, and all in favor of that motion. Okay, I see. Well, yes is okay. And opposed? Okay, that fails to carry, Mr. Clerk, on a tie.
And we've requested a recorded vote. There is a request.
If my count is right. Oh, okay, we have a request for a recorded vote. So please go ahead, Mr. Clerk, with that. The request is made by Deputy Mayor Pirelli.
Thank you. Through the acting mayor, voting on the motion, Regional and Local Councillor Pirelli.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Liu.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Barros.
Yes.
Thank you. Acting Mayor DePaula.
No.
Thank you. Councillor Munch.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor West.
No.
Thank you. Councillor Chan.
No.
Thank you. Councillor Sullivan.
No.
Thank you. That motion fails to carry on a tie vote.
Okay. So we do though need a motion to go into camera, and I'll
apologize.
As a result of that vote, there will not be an additional item beyond the one that already exists there. So the motion would be to move into camera.
Mr. Acting Mayor, if I might first.
Yep.
Before we go into a closed session as per the agenda, there are the bylaws to be adopted, but I would note that the bylaw identified as item 16.6, bylaw 7521, should not be passed. So bylaw item 16.6, number 7521, should not be passed in view of council's earlier decision on the municipal election matter.
Right, okay, so very good. Can I get a mover for the other bylaws? Thank you, Councillor Chan and Councillor Silovitz. Any discussion? All in favor? Okay, that carries. Those remaining bylaws all carry. And that we've got now a need to resolve in the closed session. I'll just read out the reason is to consider matters relating to the receiving of advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, and related to potential litigation affecting the municipality regarding the construction of the Oak Ridge Community Center. Okay, I've got, and I need a mover and a seconder to go into camera on this. Councillor West, Councillor Silovitz, thank you. Any discussion? Going into camera, okay. All in favor? Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on, everyone. Deputy Mayor Pirelli, you did want to speak? Go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to state for the record, Mr. Chairman, that this council recently voted not to go in camera, and I'm a little bit confused now. So there's certain things that this council did not respect Councillor Munch's motion and my motion, but now want to go in camera, but don't want to hear what Councillor Munch had to say. Just for the record, is that what we're doing?
No, okay. Council just voted not to add the member motion to the in-camera agenda. Council voted not to do that, but we are now about to vote on whether or not to go into camera on this other matter that has been.
I just wanted to set the record straight that we're going in camera for certain things, but we're not going in camera for other things because Councillor Munch brought up that motion. Just wanted to set the record straight.
Oh, very good. We do need to clarify. We are simply going into camera to discuss the potential litigation affecting the municipality regarding the Oak Ridge Community Center and not to discuss any other matters. All in favor of doing that? Okay. Okay, that carries. So I'll wait to get the signal from the clerk that we have successfully gone into camera.
So thank you. Through you, Mr. Acting Mayor, in keeping with our practice and for the benefit of the public and members of council, at this time, this Zoom meeting and live stream will end. We would ask members of council to please log into the closed session Zoom meeting. Following council is resolving to return into open session, following closed session, we will begin live streaming again to report out from closed session. Thank you.